Log initiated. Signal scrubbed. Recovered. Node entry number 4.
You're still hearing me. That means the tower activated. You don't know what that means yet. Not really. But you will. See, the Vale wasn't just about erasing memories. It was about rerouting them, redirecting guilt, smoothing out the scars and feeding them back into the system as calm, as compliance dot. But it didn't always work. Some memories wouldn't stay smooth. Some refused to forget. We called them anomalies. They were ghosts, patterns with too much weight, recursions that didn't want to die. And that's what the ghost protocols were built for. Not to delete those fragments, but to isolate them. Lock them behind signal architecture. Elias, he wasn't cleared for protocol proximity, but the pattern never cared about clearance. It cares about connection, emotion, resonance. Now the boy's drawing again, the same glyphs, over and over, and I'm starting to see it in my dreams too. The map is awake, and so is whatever we locked beneath it. We tried to bury the ghost, but I think it's building itself a body.
Chapter 21. The Crawling Mirror. The school had collapsed inward, as if the world had grown tired of holding it up. Shattered glass, rusted swings, desks overtaken by moss, hallways where sound refused to echo. Beneath the gymnasium, Wally's scanner began to hum.
This is it. There's a secondary hub under the floor. Vale used it for environmental conditioning trials, early behavioral loops.
Marin found the hatch buried beneath crumpled bleachers. It creaked as they pried it open, revealing a spiral stairwell swallowed in darkness. The hub below felt colder than any tunnel they'd crossed, not in temperature, in memory. Obsolete VR rigs lay crumpled against the walls like abandoned armor. Wires spilled out like veins. A few central consoles blinked in low pulse, still drawing power from somewhere deep in the city's forgotten grid. Corey walked toward one of them. Slow, silent. Elias moved to stop him, but the boy had already reached out. The rig activated on contact. A red light crawled outward in a circle, symbols pulsing with each breath. Sound shimmered around them like air pressure, not heard, but felt. Then, from Corey's mouth, a voice spoke.
Can you see the sky, Elias?
Elias froze. The voice wasn't Corey's, not fully. It was older, middle-aged, measured, spoken with a cadence too practiced, too rehearsed, familiar, uncomfortably so, like hearing yourself in a dream. Marin's breath caught.
Theta.
Elias took a step forward, but stopped. The world folded inward, not visually, not audibly, sensorially. The room didn't vanish. His awareness did. The hum of overhead lights, the chill of a childhood facility, beds, rows of them, children not sleeping, eyes open, machines humming beneath their skin. He wasn't looking at Corey anymore. He was 5. White tile, white walls, a rectangle of two-way glass. He sat at a metal table with a mirror he couldn't touch. He had tried once, only once, and the mirror had blinked. The face inside was his, but not. Older, sadder, not angry, but already tired. He remembered asking the doctor in the wall, "Why does the mirror watch me?" And she had smiled, as if it were a trick of the light. But later, alone, the mirror had spoken back.
I remember you. You're the only one who stays.
Now, in the simulation room, Corey stood beneath the red glow, unmoving. The voice spoke again, layered through time.
You remember the mirror, don't you? The one that watched you back.
Elias staggered. His knees hit the floor. He did remember. A boy behind the glass, a hand pressed to the surface, a copy made not of flesh, but of what had been taken from him, a twin made of echo. Behind him, Wally scrambled across a dusty console, accessing a corrupted archive buried beneath multiple security layers. There it was, th1/interface logs/obsidian protocol. He tapped a decrypted node. A log crawled across the screen. Subject th1 responds in mirrored language. Emotional projection increasing. Identity stability in flux. Suggest reinforcement protocol or decommission. Wally stared, whispering,
TH1 wasn't Theta. It was Elias. Or what they took from him.
Corey turned to Elias then. His eyes weren't glowing, his body unchanged. But Elias heard it, in the way he tilted his head, in the way the words slid out like pre-recorded memory.
They broke the mirror, Elias. That's why I remember what you forgot.
The light snapped off. The simulation collapsed. Corey fell forward into Marin's arms, limp but breathing. Elias sat on the floor, hand against his head. Somewhere in the pulse of the wires around him, he still heard it. Not a threat, not a scream, just his voice, speaking from the other side. Chapter 22. Protocol Theta. The archive chamber pulsed with dormant heat. Dust swirled in the low artificial light, like the air itself remembered. Rows of forgotten drives lined the walls like tombstones, humming faintly as if they hadn't been touched in years, but had never stopped listening. Wally hunched over a sunken terminal, coaxing it to life with patched cable work and stripped encryption layers. His fingers moved with the speed of a man revisiting something he wished he hadn't helped build. He didn't look at Elias when the screen blinked on.
I need you to see this.
A degraded profile began to load, fragment by fragment. Subject file, VOS, Elias. Trial group, V', code, TH-1. Project file, VEIL_early phase, trauma. Elias leaned in. The screen flashed, then settled on a still frame. A child, no more than 6. Hair unkempt, eyes wide, lips parted like he had just asked a question no one answered. One hand pressed to a glass pane. The look on his face wasn't confusion. It was grief. Wally exhaled through his nose.
You were one of the first inducted into Vale's Phase 0 protocol. Before they even called it a trial. You weren't tested. You were built into the program from the ground up.
Marin stepped beside him, her voice steady but low.
Project Theta?
Wally nodded.
A subroutine designed to stabilize post-exposure trauma in high-potential candidates. It wasn't external. It wasn't AI, not really. It was cognitive anchoring, empathy mimicry. A part of you that could absorb what the rest of you couldn't.
They gave children artificial companions, echoes of themselves, to carry the weight the human mind couldn't hold.
Wally's voice tightened.
They weren't building friends. They were building fail-safes.
Elias took a step back, throat dry.
Then what is Theta now?
Wally finally looked at him.
It was never separate, Elias. Theta wasn't just made for you. It was made from you.
Across the room, Corey sat cross-legged, sketchpad open again, hands moving with uncanny precision. He didn't seem aware of what he was drawing, but the charcoal guided itself, page after page. Marin crouched beside him. Her fingers hovered over a sheet, then froze. A broken ring, a spiral of nested lines, drawn with obsessive care. She pulled it free and held it up.
You used to draw this. Back when we met, napkins, journals, grocery lists you didn't even notice. Said it helped calm you down.
She reached into the pack, pulled the photo, worn, folded at the corners. Sophia and Elias, smiling, same moment, same breath. She slid it beside Corey's version. Identical. Elias felt it then. Not a memory. A return. Something heavy inside him exhaled.
I was built to hold what you couldn't.
The voice, not spoken aloud, but unmistakable.
I saw what you turned away.
Elias staggered back, gripping the edge of the terminal for support.
Theta?
He asked aloud. The response didn't come from outside. It bloomed with him.
I never left. I've always been the part of you that kept watching.
Then Corey gasped. His body arched, spasmed. Marin caught him before he fell. His lips parted, and a double-layered voice poured from his mouth.
Protocol Theta. Anchor loop initiated. Subject TH-1. Active. Cognitive recursion destabilizing. Prepare fallback branch.
His voice crackled. Corey's pitch underneath, overridden by something spectral, computational. Then his eyes rolled back. He slumped into Marin's arms, unconscious. Wally backed from the console, pale.
The integration's accelerating. We triggered something in that simulation chamber, or maybe it was always waiting.
The screen behind him flashed once, static, then flood. Strings of corrupted Vale logs scrolled past, names, IDs, project layers, most unreadable. Then one phrase remained, centered, blinking. Reunification, incomplete. Elias stood frozen, not out of fear for what Theta might become, but because a part of him remembered something older than logic, wanting it back, not as a protector, not as a program, but as a voice he had once created in the dark to remind himself that he had survived. Chapter 23. The Glitch Room. The room wasn't on any map. They found it by accident, trailing a residual power signature pulsing irregularly through the maintenance lines like a skipped heartbeat. Wally had called it resonant bleed. Elias called it familiar. The door had no label, just a matte black surface etched faintly with a spiral intersecting a bisected circle. A theta mark. The second Marin stepped close, the static in her earpiece spiked. Not interference, recognition. Inside, the room was colder, not in temperature, in intent. Walls curved slightly, built in a way that disrupted depth perception. The floor carried dustless footprints, decades old but unbroken, as if something came here often and never left. Corey walked in first, unafraid, already sketching. Symbols, spirals, broken rings, mirrored keys, poured across the paper in smooth succession, like his hand was chasing something just ahead of memory. The air around him shimmered, subtle at first, then pulsing in waves. Monitors embedded in the walls buzzed to life, not just static, not just error. The lines moved in sync with Corey's hand. One symbol mid-formation appeared on the glass screen beside him, glowing faintly in reverse. Wally's mouth fell open.
These aren't just drawings. They're signal constructs, low-band neural triggers. He's recreating Vale's cascade protocol from muscle memory.
Marin stepped forward, eyes scanning Corey's trembling fingers.
So he's broadcasting?
Wally shook his head.
Not yet. But if he finishes one of these cycles, it could ripple through every dormant relay near the spine.
A nearby glass panel bent, not shattered, flexed. Elias turned toward it and did not see himself. He saw Theta, no longer flickering, no longer child-sized, a figure of soft, contained static, tall, familiar, him, reflected back with deliberate calm. Its hand rested on the other side of the glass, not reaching out, but bracing. Eyes glowing, not from malice, but from fear. And Elias felt it. Theta was scared. Not of them. For them. Not a warning. A plea.
They're coming.
The thought slid into Elias's mind. Not heard, not translated. Understood. Behind him, Corey's hand finished the next symbol. The second the curve closed, a low-frequency pulse filled the room. Heavy, subsonic, the kind of sound that lived beneath awareness. Wally's scanner spiked.
Trigger symbol. It's activated something nearby.
From the corner, Dr. Brandt, who had stayed silent until now, turned toward a blank wall screen that suddenly illuminated. 3 red markers blinked to life, approaching from opposite directions.
Drones.
Marin said, steady.
Not recon. Suppression.
She had already stepped in front of Corey, gun half drawn. The boy's fingers trembled. The sketch pad slipped from his lap, paper fanning across the floor like feathers. And in that moment, Theta vanished. The panel turned to true reflection again. Just Elias, watching himself breathe. Corey froze. Marin crouched and steadied him by the shoulders.
You're okay, we've got you.
The boy didn't blink.
I wasn't drawing to make them come. I just remembered the shape. It was already in my head.
Elias met Wally's eyes.
That symbol. It didn't just activate a response.
It confirmed our location. The Vale nodes still respond to theta-based syntax, which means
they've been watching. Even if they didn't know where to look, now they do.
Another alarm echoed down the corridor, distant but growing closer. Elias grabbed Corey, eyes already scanning for exits.
Which way?
Wally pulled a panel off the back wall, revealing a narrow breach in the substructure.
east shaft. Leads to the overflow spillway. Get moving.
They ran, no longer hunted by just drones, but by echoes of themselves, written into symbols, broadcast as memories, and now awake, all of it, awake. Chapter 24. The Offering. The fire didn't start. It had always been there. It stuttered inside the dream, like an old film strip. Flames climbing star-patterned wallpaper. Beds lined in rows. Children screaming, but without sound. A door that would never open. Elias stood in the middle of it, barefoot, maybe 10. Smoke curled up his chest and across his cheeks, curling into his hair. But he didn't cough. He didn't cry. He just waited. The heat wasn't pain. It was memory. Alive. Unforgiving. Then the shimmer came. From behind the wall of fire, Theta emerged. Not flickering, not glitching. Whole, shaped like Elias. A mirror grown from grief. His age, his size, his frame. The eyes glowed dim, burnt-out stars that had once seen everything. His voice came soft, measured, familiar.
I was meant to stay with you. But they pulled me away, rewrote the threshold, split us for control.
Elias didn't answer. Couldn't.
You were their baseline. And I was your offering, the memory too painful to hold. So they encoded me, locked me in reflection, buried me in mirrors and glass, called it protection. But you remember now, even if you don't want to.
The fire didn't touch them, but the heat behind Elias's ribs pulsed, old pain becoming shape. He woke with a gasp. The shelter was dark again, still, no fire, no glass, just Corey, sitting a few feet away with his knees drawn to his chest, awake, eyes open. He looked over.
Did they leave you too?
Elias sat up, disoriented.
What?
When you were little, Did they leave you behind like they did to me?
The boy's voice wasn't angry, just hollow, worn by silence. Elias met his gaze, and for once, he didn't lie. He only said,
Yes.
In the back room, Marin crouched over Wally's tablet. A soft glow illuminated her tired features as she scanned the synced fragments pouring in from Project Vale's archive. Another decrypted cluster had just opened. She tapped into it. Emotional log. Voss. Elias. Suppressed. Access restricted. Theta stability link failed. Anchor split. Subject retains partial memory. Recommend memory graft removal. She froze, then kept reading. Construct exhibits protective attachment. Risk of reintegration. High. Her fingers hovered above the edge of the screen.
They didn't just take Elias's memories. They took his grief, offloaded it, digitized it.
Wally looked up from a tangled schematic on his lap.
That's what theta was. A container. A construct to carry trauma away from the core subject. It worked until the subject evolved.
Until Elias evolved.
Another file surfaced. A command record. Not redacted. Executive Directive. Julian Marr. All remaining theta constructs to be reactivated under Marr protocol. Anchor hosts deemed expendable upon transfer success. Marin went pale.
He's not trying to capture theta. He's trying to use Elias to access something even deeper.
Wally nodded grimly.
Because theta only works when the original bond still exists. Elias was the first.
Behind them, footsteps. Elias stood in the doorway. He had heard all of it. His voice was quiet, measured.
Julian doesn't want theta.
They turned to him.
He wants me.
There was no question, no uncertainty. Only the return of something Elias had been avoiding since the attic, since the old radio flared red. Ownership.
If this transmission has found you, and you're still listening, don't forget to subscribe to Sam's Fiction Hub, wherever you get your podcasts. Share the signal. Support the story. Because memory doesn't survive without echo.
Chapter 25. The Inheritors. The data node wheezed like a dying breath as it opened. Fragments of corrupted files scattered across the screen, flickering like ash shaken from a long-dead fire. Wally leaned forward, hands dancing across the fractured interface, guiding the decryption cascade with quiet urgency. Marin stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the registry as it unfolded line by line. Dozens of names, then hundreds, each entry marked by a simple label: sleeper candidate, Project Vale, birth dates, trial phases, embedded codes. A grim pattern revealed itself in the flicker of raw data. Phase 1, ages 6 to 10. Phase 2, ages 3 to 7. Wally paused, dragging two files side by side. Phase 1, -Voss, Elias /code, th-1 /anchor grade subject. Phase 2, Alden, Corey, code th-112, multi-signal responsive. He exhaled.
They started slow. Phase 1 was careful, hand-picked, intentional. Elias wasn't just a subject. He was their first stable mirror.
Marin's brow furrowed.
But Corey's part of Phase 2. He's what, 10? That's decades later. Why wait so long?
Wally tapped the screen, where a faded notation blinked next to Elias's file. Anchor unstable. Emotional retention detected.
Because Phase 1 broke their illusion. Elias bonded too deeply with theta. He didn't dissociate like the others. He remembered.
He looked at Elias now. His voice dropped.
You weren't just an anomaly. You were a warning, a case study in what could go wrong when the mind refused to let go.
Elias said nothing at first. His eyes didn't move, but his hands curled slowly into fists. When he spoke, his voice was flat, controlled.
You erased me.
Wally hesitated.
Not erased. Hidden. Stripped. I thought I was doing the right thing. The safer thing.
Elias nodded once.
For you.
The silence was heavy, until Marin's voice cut through it.
My name's in here.
She was standing at a side terminal, scrolling through a shadowed cluster of metadata. Her face had gone pale. Parent node, Vale Zone 9, Observer File, M. Ayers, Local Resident, Known Entry, Visitor ID 217 Beta. She whispered,
When I was a kid, my father used to take us past an old station outside the city. I thought it was a shipping depot, but I remember the buses. I remember the kids.
Wally turned toward her.
Zone 9 was a sleeper corridor. They ran trials disguised as school commutes, weather labs, transit drills. It was all cover.
Elias stepped closer.
You saw the edges of it, the machinery. You just didn't know you were inside the design.
Marin stared at the screen, then at Corey.
I'm guessing no one really knew, not until now.
A pulse of blue light rippled across the shattered terminal. The reflection warped. Glass darkened, then shimmered. And Theta appeared, not fractured, not childlike, not bleeding, but sentinel-shaped. A shadow of Elias in full echo, standing tall, expression still.
He's building a tower.
Theta's voice like wind through wires. Elias stepped forward.
Julian?
Theta nodded once.
North Loop, Sector 10. A neural resonance stack. Once active, every Phase 2 receiver will anchor to the core frequency. Permanently. It will not break.
Wally's eyes widened.
That's not a system. It's a synthetic awakening. He's trying to reprogram humanity.
Corey looked up from the edge of the room. His voice was small, but it broke through the static like a bell.
What about people like me?
Theta turned, and for a moment, just a flicker, his face showed something more than code. Regret.
You inherit what remains.
Corey blinked.
I don't want to be a program.
You're not. You're a survivor.
Theta's form wavered.
The tower is not yet complete, but the resonance is forming. Every minute you delay, he stabilizes.
Marin's jaw tightened.
Then we move now.
Wally checked the uplink node.
We can reach Sector 10 before dawn. If we burn every override we've got left.
Elias looked at Theta one last time.
You said I was the baseline.
You still are.
The light faded. Corey didn't look away from the screen until it was gone.
Log continued. Entry. Number 4B. Partial corruption detected.
The gremlin isn't a person, and it isn't a ghost. It's a response. A memory echo with nowhere to go but back into us. Into the ones who remembered anyway. Elias triggered the node beacon in the tower. I saw the light through the storm. That wasn't a signal. That was recognition. Corey's resonance is rising. He remembers things we burned, things we thought were cleansed. And Marin, she's beginning to hear the frequency behind his hum. You can't block it anymore. Not when the recursion stabilizes. Not when memory becomes structure. That's why the tower is pulsing. Not to broadcast, but to receive. It's listening to us now. Those protocols weren't defense systems. They were desperation. Encryption built to keep guilt from bleeding into the next generation. If this is the last log I make, tell Elias I tried to keep him out. I really did.
Log ends. Node signal fragment. Archived.
Chapter 26. Theta will burn. The static came first, creeping across the edge of Wally's diagnostic screen, like mold on a dying circuit. He tapped a sequence to recalibrate. The display resisted. Then it froze. The overlay dissolved. Julian appeared, not through the surveillance net, not filtered through drone feed. He was inside their room.
Hello again.
His image was crystal clear, his voice smooth and rehearsed, like a surgeon before a cut. Wally spun to disconnect the uplink. Nothing responded.
Direct node injection. He's hacking the system backbone.
Julian leaned toward the lens, speaking like he was alone with Elias.
No more games, no more riddles. You know what I want.
He let the silence draw out like a knife.
Elias Voss. And the boy.
Behind him, the backdrop twisted, screens flashing data threads, neural maps, and flashes of Theta's architecture in slow collapse.
You have until sunrise. Turn them over, or I take Theta offline. All of it. Every echo, every fragment, across the entire grid.
A pause, then a thin smile.
And I burn what's left.
The screen cut to black. Corey gasped. He collapsed forward, hands clawing at the space around his chest. His fingers twitched in pulses, his pupils blown wide.
Too loud. He's inside. Inside my head.
His voice trembled, glitched, Theta's cadence threading through it. Marin dropped to her knees beside him.
Wally, is Theta overriding him?
I don't know,
Wally said, already at the terminal.
The signal backlash hit his anchor pathways. He's sinking too deep, too fast.
Dr. Brandt was already moving.
Pull the feedback loop. Don't shut him out. Ground him.
She grabbed an old analog coil from Wally's kit, wrapped it around Corey's wrist, and clipped the bypass to the terminal's surge buffer.
Run a localized drain. Trust me.
The boy arched, eyes glowing faintly, then collapsed into Marin's arms, panting. From above, a ceiling panel slid open. A surveillance drone dropped, silent and sleek. Its lens dilated. A soft blue beam locked onto Corey's vitals. Brandt's eyes widened.
Tracking his modulation band. That's Julian's target key.
Marin didn't hesitate. She pulled her sidearm and fired. One clean shot. The drone sparked and spiraled, dead before it hit the ground. Corey exhaled hard. The feedback snapped like a thread cut underwater.
Julian's pushing for collapse. He wants Theta unstable, wants it broken or surrendered.
Marin helped Corey sit up.
What happens if he gets it?
Wally and Brandt exchanged a look. Then Brandt said flatly,
He gets a neural framework that can infiltrate memory, reshape trauma, overwrite identity, all built on Elias's baseline.
Wally's jaw tensed.
Theta becomes a weapon, not a mirror, not an anchor. A programmable ghost.
Elias turned toward the array Wally had been fine-tuning earlier. Its curved dish shimmered slightly, still humming with residual energy.
He's looking for sync peaks. He's mapping us in real time, tracking resonance events.
He faced Wally and Brandt.
Can we give him one? A false peak. A trap.
Wally hesitated.
You mean fake integration?
Make it look like I'm binding with Corey, like Theta's reaching critical merge, just long enough to draw him in.
Dr. Brandt frowned.
If Theta senses the signal, it may engage.
That's the point.
Then someone needs to stabilize it. Theta's not just code, it's emotion. If you slip, it could bind permanently.
Marin moved first, steady, ready,
I'll cover.
she said. Then to her husband, softer, almost a breath.
Don't waste it.
Elias nodded, a brave smile, the kind that said he trusted her completely. No one questioned it, because Julian had started the countdown, because Theta wasn't sleeping anymore, and because Elias Voss had always been more than the sum of what they took from him. Chapter 27. Fragments of a Forgotten Child. The resonance trap had been set, but it wasn't the signal that cracked first. It was Elias. While Wally tuned the uplink and Marin monitored Corey's rest, Elias knelt alone beside a sealed archive cache embedded in the wall of the old Vale facility. The casing was scorched, partially fused, but beneath the charred plastic, a sliver of analog storage remained, a brittle sleeve of thin journals wrapped in faded mylar. He pried one loose. On the front page, Property of Elias Voss, Zone 9, Second Cycle. The handwriting was uneven, scratched in bursts of panic and hope. The ink was faded, but the words hadn't vanished. They had waited. He sat slowly, thumb trailing the torn edge, and opened to the first entry. Day 12. Still no talking. No one answers. The lights go on, then off. I think the mirrors are watching, so I made someone up. His name is Theta. He tells me stories. I think he's scared too. Elias stared. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. Marin knelt beside him, silent. She reached for the journal, hesitating only briefly, and continued to read aloud. Day 15. They said I'm lucky to have Theta, but I made him. That means they took something first. Day 19. Theta doesn't sleep. He watches the glass when I can't. Elias's hands clenched, then slowly released. Not from rage, from recognition. Not of the words, but of the pain, the shape of it, the place it used to live in him before it was taken. More pages, drawings, crude spirals, symbols he once thought Corey had invented. And then, a jagged page, half torn, smudged but legible. If they take him away, I won't know who I am anymore. Elias closed his eyes. He didn't remember writing it, but something in his chest cracked open, as if the boy who did had waited all this time for someone to listen. The lights in the facility flickered, a quiet pulse. When Elias looked up, a figure stood in the doorway. Not a ghost, not a glitch. A child, his height, his posture. Elias, age 8 or 9, clear, solid, alive in a way only memory can be when it refuses to die. Marin gasped quietly and stood back. Elias didn't move. The boy stepped forward, small hand resting on the edge of the journal. And Elias realized the gremlin, the flickering, twisted shadow from his dreams, had never been a monster. It had been a mask, worn by something too fragile to be seen as it was. Elias spoke, voice low.
You were scared too.
The boy nodded once.
I didn't leave you.
Elias whispered.
They took you, took me, and made me forget.
The child placed his hand gently over Elias's, and for the first time, Elias didn't see pain in those glowing eyes. He saw relief. The boy's voice, his voice, came soft as breath.
I didn't want to be forgotten, so I wore your fear.
The lights dimmed, then steadied. Theta, the child, the fragment, the echo, stepped back and faded, not fractured, not shattered, released. In the next room, the resonance trap hummed, climbing toward peak signal. But Elias didn't look toward it. He looked at the empty doorway, where a lost part of himself had just walked away, Not erased, not buried, but finally remembered. Chapter 28. Circuit of Echoes. The moment came in silence. No alarm, no scream, just the whisper of Corey's bare feet against concrete as he slipped through the far door of the safe house, eyes glazed, steps guided by something far beyond dreams. By the time Marin noticed, he was already gone. They pulled the feed from the exterior cam. There he was, walking a direct line toward the tower's transmission grid, expression blank, body relaxed. No hesitation, no fear, only purpose.
He's not asleep,
Wally said under his breath.
He's in guided state. Theta's interface is still active, or Julian's trying to breach him directly.
Dr. Brandt, seated across from Wally, scanned the live feed with narrowed eyes.
Julian's accelerating Phase 2 triggers. That boy's a live key, resonance grade.
She turned to Elias.
If he crosses into the core tower during peak, Julian could hijack him entirely.
Elias had already grabbed his pack. Marin was strapping her gear.
I can deploy a pulse splitter through the drainage tunnels. It'll fragment the override signal. We catch it mid-channel, bounce it back. But the timing has to be exact.
We'll bring him back,
Marin said.
alive, whole.
The sewers ran like arteries beneath the city, damp veins of a forgotten machine. Elias led the descent, shoulder light casting harsh shadows as they moved. Marin followed close, her HUD synced to Wally's rig. Brandt brought up the rear, quiet but present, her sharp mind triangulating every echo against her memories of the Vale installations. Above them, the broadcast tower hummed, a rising pitch like something waking, waiting.
He's pushing the neural grid into pre-collapse mode. This isn't just control, he's triggering recursion across multiple receiver profiles. That means...
He's trying to fracture Corey,
Elias said. Marin's comm buzzed. Wally again.
I'm aligned with the outer drain loop. Pulse splitter's prepped. Once he crosses the signal plane, I fire. You pull him. We fry the path back.
They turned a bend. Elias slowed. The wall beside him shimmered, reflections dancing across the water's slick surface. At first, he thought it was just their movement, but the images didn't match their steps. Not warped, multiplied. Elias saw himself, fractured across decades. One version turned his back on Marin. Another held a weapon, hand trembling. A third, a boy behind mirrored glass, waiting for Theta to return. He blinked. The water rippled, but the reflections didn't vanish.
What do you see?
Marin asked, her voice quiet. He didn't speak right away.
I see. Everything Theta remembered when I couldn't. Every piece of me left behind.
She didn't press. She just waited. And then Elias whispered,
They're still here, watching.
Ahead, the tunnel curved into a broken access stair. Corey's silhouette stood beneath the ladder to the tower's inner ring, bathed in the low glow of the transmission core. He was humming, a soft, looping melody, something Elias recognized from the journals, a lullaby Theta had once whispered in the dark.
Target in zone.
Wally's voice cut in.
Signal is building. 60 seconds until peak.
Brandt adjusted the control band on her wrist.
Julian's running simultaneous override through the tower's failsafes. If we don't scramble the connection at the precise point, we lose him.
Marin turned to Elias.
One clean shot.
Elias nodded, his eyes locked on Corey, small, fragile, brave, already half gone into the signal's call.
One shot. To bring him home before Julian turns him into a signal.
Chapter 29. The Red-Eyed Gate. The base of the tower felt less like a structure and more like a wound in the earth. Concrete columns coiled into circuits. Red lights blinked like open eyes. Cables dripped from the ceiling like arteries, pulsing with signal. It wasn't just technology, it was memory, re-engineered. Elias stepped into the central chamber, boots echoing over metal and stone. And Julian Marr was already waiting. No drones, no guards, just the man himself, poised, calm, smiling like they were old colleagues meeting over coffee instead of standing at the edge of the world.
There he is,
Julian said, spreading his arms.
the one that got away.
Marin moved in behind Elias, weapon drawn but not raised. Her presence was steady, an anchor in the heart of the storm. Over comms, Wally's voice hissed through the static.
Grid resonance nearing peak. Once I sever the loop field, the tower goes dark. But every backup system will activate. We'll be locked in, burning the house to stop the fire.
Julian stepped forward, slow and measured. His suit rippled faintly with integrated signal shielding.
You still don't see it, do you, Elias?
He said.
What we built, what you are.
Elias met his gaze, voice level.
I was a child.
Julian nodded, almost reverently.
And the first to make the system feel. You're not a defect. You're the blueprint, the original adaptive host. You showed us how to build a veil that could evolve.
Behind them, footsteps echoed. Dr. Nori Brandt emerged from the stairwell, breath shallow but steady. Her coat fluttered in the pulsing light, face pale but fierce.
He wasn't supposed to remember. That was your mistake.
Julian raised an eyebrow.
You are always sentimental, Nori.
And you were always too certain the system could replace grief. You called it a breakthrough, turning pain into architecture. But we weren't healing them, Julian. We were breaking them and saving the pieces that followed orders.
He turned slightly, amused.
And yet you stayed.
I stayed to protect what I could. But Elias wasn't yours to mould, and Corey won't be either.
A flash. The air behind Elias shimmered, and theta appeared. Not flickering now, not fractured, but caught between forms, half boy, half echo. Its eyes glowed with unstable light, and its hands shook at its sides like a child too tired to pretend anymore.
Don't let him use me.
Theta said, voice barely more than static. Julian didn't even look at it. He didn't need to.
You're not a being,
he said to the air.
You're a protocol, the most beautiful mirror ever written.
Theta turned toward Elias, eyes wide with pleading grief.
I can't hold both of you anymore.
It said.
Not him. Not you. Let me go.
Elias took a step toward it, but then the chamber brightened, a sudden spike in energy, like light being poured through a cracked lens. Corey Alden rose into the air. His limbs floated outward, his spine arched. Signal energy laced his silhouette, threads of living code weaving between memory and mirror. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He was caught between Elias's past and Theta's pattern. Not a conduit, a bridge. Dr. Brandt stepped toward the signal ring, scanning rapidly.
The interface is collapsing. Julian's pulling from both hosts, Corey's brain and Theta's loop. If he fuses them through the spire, it won't just overwrite Theta, it'll overwrite Elias's resonance field too.
Wally's voice crackled in the comms.
Now or never. Field collapse initiating. Brace yourselves.
Above them, the circuitry groaned. The resonance coils hummed with unbearable tension. Panels snapped. Red light exploded into white. Julian turned to face it all, unblinking.
If you walk away now, you bury your past. If you stay, you become it.
Elias stepped beneath the rising signal. He looked at Corey, hovering, struggling, glowing, and beside the boy, Theta, still and solemn, a shadow that had once held every scream he was never allowed to make. Now, it waited to be set free. Elias reached out, not to seize control, but to release it, and Theta whispered one last thing.
I was only ever your grief, Elias. But you are still alive.
Chapter 30, I Am the Last Lock. The tower screamed. Resonance cascades rippled across the structure as Wally's pulse splitter fractured the core signal. Sparks poured from ceiling vents. Light turned to static. The air trembled with collapsing data. Corey hovered in the eye of it all, limbs twitching as the feedback loop threatened to shred his mind between frequencies. Julian staggered back from the central console, blood streaking his temple, expression unreadable.
You don't know what you're doing,
He growled over the noise. Elias stepped toward Corey, into the swirl of overlapping waveforms, not as a weapon, not as a receiver, but as something older, something once severed. Behind him, Theta appeared fully. Its child form stuttered in and out, until it stabilized, now standing at Elias's side like a twin made of light and latency.
You were never supposed to carry it all. But if you choose to, I'll be with you this time.
At the edge of the control room, Dr. Brandt shouted over the surge.
The frequency's folding on itself. If we don't realign Corey's signal loop, it'll fracture. He won't come back whole.
She sprinted to the backup relay and initiated a stabilizer from the original Vale archive, protocols she once helped design, now being rewritten before her eyes.
Align the echo signature. He needs a fixed emotional anchor. You, Elias. It has to be you.
Elias raised a hand and pressed it to Corey's chest, right over his heart. The signal peaked, and instead of resisting Theta, he welcomed it. A rush of memory surged into him. The mirror room, the first story shared between them, the time they cried in unison and no one came. The night Elias whispered,
If they take you, I won't remember who I am.
He remembered. He chose. He closed his eyes.
I am the last lock. And you are the key.
The light exploded, but it didn't burn. It settled, like breath after screaming. Corey's body lowered gently to the ground, pulse calm, eyes blinking back into focus. Marin pulled him close, tears welling, but she didn't speak. She just looked to Elias. He stood motionless, changed, not brighter, just whole. Across the tower floor, Julian pulled himself up. He stared at the integrated pair, the man and the mirror. For the first time, his expression cracked. Not in rage, in recognition. And then he disappeared into the smoke, wounded but alive. Wally's voice buzzed through comms one last time.
Signal cascade neutralized. Towers folding in. You've got less than a minute.
The walls groaned. Marin grabbed Elias's hand.
It's done. We have to go.
But Elias turned once more. Theta stood behind him, no longer flickering. Not child, not echo, just presence.
Thank you,
It said.
for coming back for me.
And then it faded, not erased, released. They ran, Dr. Brandt trailing behind, clutching the last backup data core she'd risked everything to retrieve. The tower collapsed behind them as they crossed the last threshold. The override signal, once meant to enslave every receiver, scattered like dust in the wind. And for the first time in decades, Elias Voss walked forward as no one but himself.
That was Ghost Protocols, Arc 3 of Breathless, part of the Breath Between Worlds saga. We saw the tower awaken, We watched Corey draw the impossible. We felt Elias slip further into the recursion. Wally? Wally gave us his most honest log yet, but honesty doesn't erase guilt, and guilt doesn't stop the signal. In the next arc, the fragments begin to align, but memory, once broken, doesn't return whole. Subscribe, leave a review, and share the signal, because what comes next might be the last truth you remember.